Show of hands, how many people have heard anything about the Constitutional Convention? That's more than most of the population in New York State. I'm not kidding you. You'll see this a little bit later. This is going to be probably the biggest vote the public sector and the labor movement is going to have in this country. I want to repeat that. The biggest vote that the public sector and the labor movement in the country, not just in New York State. And you might say, well, this just affects New York State. It doesn't, and I'll tell you why. Remember Wisconsin? Remember Michigan? Remember Ohio? Those are blue states. Those are big blue collar. Never going to go right to work. Well, where are they today? Right? This is an opportunity that those that hate the unions and have been looking to do away with them for some time are going to pounce on. So I have two presentations here tonight. I'm going to break them out. The first is going to be the process, right? We're going to talk about the convention, how it works, and why it's important that we get out the vote. Now, of everybody that just raised their hand that were familiar with it, how many made sure that their neighbors are familiar with it and their friends are familiar with it? Okay. This is critical, okay? This isn't just, you, the member, going out to vote. This is going to be on the back of the ballot on Election Day. Most people go in and vote, and it's an off year. So there's only 4 county exec races and a mayoral race in New York City. So most of the states not paying attention to any of this. Upstate, in off years, when there's a ballot initiative, usually carries the day. So it's going to be incumbent upon the unions in New York City and Long Island to get out and vote against this. That's the question. Under our New York State Constitution, the way it's currently written, every 20 years this goes on the ballot. That's your question. Shall there be a convention to revise the Constitution and amend the same? What's the answer? No. Okay? On the back of the ballot, that's the question. Yes or no? Make sure that check is there. Okay, or no? I don't care who the politicians are that you like or don't like. They don't really matter in this election. This is the only thing that matters. This is the process. Well, as I said, on November 7th, you're going to have the ballot, right? The question's going to be on the ballot. So if you vote no, there's no convention. It's over. We don't have to deal with it for another 20 years, okay? If you vote yes, then next year you're going to elect delegates, right? There's going to be 204 delegates statewide. I'm sure you've heard some of the ads, and you're going to get a full court press on this, okay? They're going to tell you that this is going to be the People's Convention. You can be a delegate. I'm going to show you later. You are not going to be a delegate. Then, once you vote for your delegates the following November, April 2nd, 2019, they convene. Now, when these delegates convene, they got to make up rules. They got to put some procedures together. So this is a process that's going to take time. Once they convene, there's no end date on the convention. They can keep it open as long as they want. They can put in amendments. They can rewrite the whole Constitution. So once they convene, the next time they're supposed to, the following year, in November 2019, you get to vote on the propositions. But I said it doesn't close. And then when you vote on the propositions, the amendments to the Constitution, and as I said, it could be a whole renewed Constitution, or it can just be individuals. It could be one ratification. It could be hundreds of ratifications. You'll see that later, okay? And then once that's done the following year, it goes into effect on January 1, 2020, all right? So that's the process. Now we'll get into the meat and potatoes. Here's the history of the Constitutional Convention, right? And this is what you got to look at. The last time we had a Constitutional Convention where they voted to have a Constitutional Convention was 1967. Most of the amendments that were proposed were packaged and it was rejected, but it was a 3-year process. And you got to remember, 1967, Vietnam War, there's a lot going on in this country, right? We're in an even worse position here today. So This is why it's not a good thing. If you look back 1938, 1915, 1894, there were some good amendments then, right? We're talking about the Industrial Revolution. We're talking about equal protection. Those are things that society was looking for. Do you think society really cares if you guys are getting a pension and they're paying for it? Absolutely not. Okay? Next. So what's at stake? I represent public sector, private sector, building trades, non-building trades, and security guards, teachers, you guys. Prevailing rate is an established rate in the construction industry. It's in the Constitution that when you do a state or a governmental job, municipal job, you have to pay the prevailing rate in the locality. That could be taken out. Protection against reduction in pension benefits. Article 5, Section 7. Your pension is protected. You open up this convention, you're rolling the dice. Civil service, merit and fitness. Article 5, Section 6. The right to collectively bargain and organize. They'd love to take that away, right? And don't forget, we have a case going up to the Supreme Court. We're going to find out next month when all argument's going to be on that Janus case, which was the successor to Friedrichs, where they could do away with your union altogether. So if you get a shot from the federal government and then it's followed up by this, you're not going to have too many more union meetings. The right to quality education, workers' compensation, the Triborough Amendment, environmental protections, and veteran protections. These are all guaranteed under the New York State Constitution, and every one of them could be at risk. I'm not saying they are, but why gamble on that at this time? Thanks. So here's what happens. As I said, if you go to it, and it should happen, just by chance we get a convention, it's not over yet, but it's getting a lot tougher to stop. November 6, 2018, you're going to elect all the delegates, the 204, and they're 204 elected delegates, and I use the term elected loosely, because it's going to be most of the people that you know already that are in government, your assemblymen, your senators. Those are the ones that are going to be the delegates to this Constitution. So, and you see the way it's broken down, there'll be 3 delegates from each of the 63 state Senate districts, and then an additional 15 at-large delegates. So this is what they're going to tell you. This is going to be the sweep that you're going to see in the coming months, right, leading up to the election. People's Convention, right? And this is all they're going to talk about. Corruption in Albany, right? They can't get out of their own way. More politicians go away in handcuffs and get elected out of office. And everybody's going to agree with that. Everyone's ticked off the way government works, right? And they're going to tell you the only way to change that is to do a constitutional convention. So are you going to be a delegate? That's what you need. To get on a party line, you're going to need 1,000 signatures of 5% of the enrolled parties in their district, right? Anybody here, the head of the Democratic Party, Republican Party, that can get themselves on? And if you do, you're one of 204. Independent delegates would need 3,000 or 5% in the last gubernatorial election. Statewide at-large delegates would require 15,000 signatures, sorry. And the state committees, and let's not kid ourselves, they're going to have the power to appoint the delegates at large, okay? They're also going to be appointing the other delegates. So, and if you still think that you can be a delegate, once the convention opens up, between now and next November, they can pass legislation that changes the rules on how to become a delegate as well. So do you see what's at stake? These promises are going to be empty promises, and everybody's going to buy into it. The other thing you're going to hear are your taxes are too high. The only way to change this is to amend the Constitution. And where they're going to do that? On your pensions. All right, next slide. So assuming that happens, like I said before, the delegates are going to meet. So what's in it for the delegates in this convention? Why is it open and how's it close? Well, they're going to get $79,500 plus a pension credit, and they get all the benefits. So if it's your elected assemblyman or senator that's already in office, they're going to get this on top of their regular salary. So there's a vested interest in them to have a convention, right? So just 1 year of salary just for delegates is $16,218,000. Now to do a comparable, the last time we had a convention, there was also 300 salaried staff 50 years ago. That number would probably be closer to 3,000 salaried staff, right? And then by a majority vote, once they're ready, they determine what's going to be on there. Then we have, no, you're good. So each amendment will then be voted on by the delegates, and then they get to decide how those amendments are going to be put on the ballot, right? As I said before, let's say it's public sector pensions. They can vote to ratify it and cap it. They could do whatever they want. But they know that they're going to get resistance from the union, so what are they going to do? They can package it with other amendments to entice people to say, oh yeah, you might be against that, but you're going to like this instead, right? So these are the things that you don't have any control over. So once the delegates get into a room, they can come up with 200 different amendments. And it's the way they package them together, right? Put all the good stuff and then throw the pension in as one of them. So if you like all this good stuff, you got to vote for it and the pension's in there. In all likelihood, they're not going to go line item on each one. And if amendment's voted down, that's it, it's rejected. If it's passed the following January 1, it goes into effect. Common argument you're going to get, well, we need the Constitutional Convention. You don't. Since 1894, our Constitution has been amended over 200 times without a Constitutional Convention. What's involved? You just need both houses of the legislature to pass identical resolutions in 2 consecutive sessions, right? And it runs 2 years in New York. The second passage much came after the legislative elections are held, and it has to be identical. They can't amend it, you know, after the first year, say we didn't like it, we want to amend it a little bit. So it happened 200 times. It's not that uncommon. What's more uncommon is the Constitutional Convention and getting an amendments through the Constitutional Convention. If you go back to that slide in the beginning, remember there was only 8 of them, right? And most of them were rejected. The last one was like 1915 or 1935. So here are the challenges. 2013, this time, you know, it's an off year. That was the turnout, 27%, right? So our charge is to get the 27% they're going to vote no. And we only need, what, 14% of that 27%. It's not a heavy lift, but it's incumbent upon everybody in this room to get this through to everybody, right? There's no top ticket races, as I said before. You have one in Nassau and Suffolk, so there'll be a turnout, but they need to remember to turn over the ballot. Don't vote for your county exec and then walk out and say, oh, I'm done, right? That, I would start with the amendment, whether or not there's going to be a Constitutional Convention. Because as I said, whoever you elect is going to be there for 4 years. That convention can affect you for 20 years or more. Here's the good news and the bad news. First, the bad news. One more. Since there's no high-profile races, a lot of people aren't going to be paying attention to it. That's why it's incumbent for the unions to get involved, right? But the downside to that is the more money the special interests have to pour into this. And I'm going to show you in my second half, and I don't have the videos, but I will show you, and maybe I could give them to Bill at your next union meeting. You can look at them for yourself on YouTube. Reclaim New York. And I'll just stop there for a second. Reclaim New York has these catchy little videos on YouTube, right? And it's 3 themes. 1, taxes are too high. Everybody's paying too much. And they have these catchy little pies where they show what the average income is in Suffolk or in Patchogue or different areas. And they take the pie chart and they show you how much you pull out in taxes, right? They just keep pulling them out. Income tax, real estate tax, sales tax, all comes out. And then you're left with this little sliver. You have $2,000 or something. That's what they tell you, right? So you're saying, you know what? I do feel that. That's the way it feels. I'm in debt. We got to do something about the taxes. The other thing is the corruption, right? The only way to get rid of these bums, and this is by design, folks. Remember last session, the legislative session, where they wanted to get ethics reform passed, and it didn't get done? Why do you think it didn't get done? Because it plays right into this. It says, see, they won't do it to themselves, right? But we can do that. We can force that legislative reform at a later date, and we'll make sure that we do it. That's up to the unions to do as well. And then the third thing is the transparency. This is how Reclaim New York got started. So what they did a couple of years ago, they did FOIL requests. Everybody know what a FOIL request is? Freedom of Information. So they sent them out to all the municipalities, and they said, we want your finances, right? So under FOIL, under the Public Officers Law, once they get that, they have 30 days to respond. Well, it's an administrative bureaucracy, right? Especially some of the smaller districts, whether it's a school district or municipality, they don't necessarily all have full-time staff, so they may take longer than 30 days. Well, they have a complaint ready to be filed in state court on the 31st day when they don't hear an answer. And what they'll tell you is, the only reason they got those responses is because they filed the lawsuit, which is not true. One town that they did it to was Babylon. By the time Babylon got it, they were already putting the stuff together. They filed a lawsuit. None of those lawsuits went anywhere, by the way. They were all pulled. But they want to show that they filed a complaint because they're for the people, right? Reclaim New York. And then the last thing, well, so that was it, the transparency, corruption, and the taxes. So that is going to be the theme of what we're going to start seeing as we get closer to this election. But here's some of the good news. The less people that vote, the more the unions are going to make a difference, right? We are the only ones that are really mobilized. We have a built-in base. How many people here are delegates or stewards? So when you go back and you meet with your members, you got to stress this upon them. I know there's literature at the table. This is going to be, not understating this or overstating this. This is going to be the most important vote in your careers to date, okay? So what we did, I started getting involved in this a while ago, and I put some calls out to people that I knew that were in politics for a long time. I said, listen, we got a real problem here. And when you look at the Reclaim New York videos, you're going to say, yeah, that is going to be tough to fight, because you can't just go video to video, right? So what we did is we formed a coalition. I didn't, but other members did. And if you see, go ahead. You have Planned Parenthood and Right to Work working against it, right? You got the NRA and the Conservative Party along with Metro Justice. You got Equality New York, the NAACP. These are all the groups that are against it, right? Because they're saying, you know, if I'm a gun right, I want my gun. Well, they realize if you open it up, they may ban guns in New York State, right? Or you can just say just the opposite. These are issues. Any one of their issues could be at stake, and they realize that. But we can't count on them to get the word out on this. This isn't their most important issue. All right. So this was in April of this year. And that's why when I started today, I wanted a show of hands of how many people heard something about it or heard nothing about it. If you look on the left, because you can't read it that well, it says 61% didn't know anything at all or had no opinion about a constitutional convention. That was just in April. In union households, we weren't doing much better. We were only at 51%. Didn't know anything about it, right? How many people knew a great deal about it? In union households, it was 9%. 9%. Your future is at stake here, and nobody's paying attention. I'm not blaming anybody, but this is done by design. This is why I agreed. I've been speaking to unions now. I have them all booked for my schedule because this is our livelihood. Mine as well. The 24% know nothing at all, right? That was pretty consistent on both sides, or didn't know very much at all. So you can see we have our work cut out here. All right? Next slide. It has broad support across the party line. 67% of Democrats and 55% of Republicans and 59% of independents support holding one, as 63% upstate respondents, right? Even in union households, those likely to have already heard from major state unions, 60% they said they support holding a constitutional convention, right? It sounds good. This is what we're up against in our society today. So I got one more presentation I want to show you, because it's one thing to show the process and what's at stake, But when you understand really the forces that are behind it, you'll have a better understanding of what we're up against. This is just all the excuses you're going to hear. I'm retired, it doesn't affect me. I hear what you're saying, but I think ethics reform is that important. We haven't had one in a long time, maybe we're due. I don't need a reminder, I vote every year. I don't want you having my contact information. I'll fill it in later, I'll be at election day. Folks, I know, you understand as you leave here tonight that it's important, but when you go home to your spouse and to your children at a voting age, or you go to a party this weekend and you're talking to your neighbors, when you go back to work the rest of this week, you got to make sure they know how important this is. Okay? Together we can protect this, right? We can protect what we have. We're not asking for anything more. This is in the climate, right? 1915, 1930s, you know, when we're looking for equal rights, we needed more. Now, that's not the environment for it across the nation. We're looking to hold on to what we have. We don't want to open this up.